Hello everyone and welcome back. Today we are doing a deck tech for Mr. House, President and CEO. Mr. House is a Mardu 04 legendary artifact creature human. He says whenever you roll a 4 or higher, create a 3/3 colorless robot artifact creature token. If you rolled 6 or higher, instead create that token and a treasure token. Then we can pay 4 mana, tap him, roll a 6-sided die plus an additional 6-sided die for each mana from treasures spent to activate this ability. So in this whole deck, we are rolling 4 treasures. Little disclaimer, at the making of this video, the full Fallout set hasn't been released yet or fully spoiled, so this deck list doesn't have any of the cards really that are from that set, so when the set does start to get spoiled, there's probably going to be a lot of obvious includes that I just simply don't have because I simply don't know. So I want to talk about the reason I picked this deck to make, the spicy tech behind Mr. House. Is he cares about rolling 4 and higher. His own ability lets you roll a d6 from his bottom ability. However, his top ability says that you don't need to roll a d6, you just got to get 4 or higher, right? So most of this deck is rolling d20s because it's way easier to roll higher than a 6 on a d20 than it is on a d6. So we're going to almost always, or at least likely, we're going to get the robot and the treasure. Before I go in any further, guys, I just want to say the deck cost about $500, $600 at the making of this video. I'm going to drop a link in the bio down below. Check that out. Definitely helps me out, helps the channel out. If you buy any of your cards through there, greatly appreciate it. And then just like, comment down below. Definitely subscribe to the channel if you like what you see. It really helps me keep it going. Going on to the game plan. So, we need House to win. We just straight up do. He's too crucial of an engine for us not to have him. So we always really just want to roll as many dice as we can. That's kind of the whole point. So early game, we just want to play Mr. House and get an engine that has like whatever kind of dice rolls set up so we can start profiting off him right away. We don't really need to use his ability a ton, but it's definitely great if we just want to try and gamble on getting more, but d20s are probably better to do that. Mid-game, we're just going to amass creatures and mana just by going to combat, getting a lot of treasures and guys, just because a lot of our guys, when they go to combat, they will just kind of make us roll a d20 anyway, and then they have their own fun ability. And then late game, attack with an army of robots. We'll have so much mana and so much value that it's going to be really hard for our opponents to kind of go with us, because we're essentially getting 3/3s that bring mana with them. And worst case, Mr. House dies. He only costs 3 mana to play. He'll cost 5 mana to bring him back. And we make a lot of treasure with him anyways, so it's really not that big of a deal. If he does die, we can get him back pretty easily. Let's talk about vulnerabilities. Getting unlucky is always the biggest vulnerability because we are playing with chance. We could go to game and we could roll exclusively 1s on all the d6s, d12s, d20s we roll. You know, it's chance, it's a roll, can't do much about it. But then we have other cards like Artifact Hate, like Stony Silence, just says we can't activate abilities of our artifacts. It means we can't tap our treasure, we can't get mana from them. Cards like Vandablast that just destroy all artifacts, all of our artifacts, because that's pretty much our whole deck. And then just cards like Farewell that are just going to exile big sweeps and make us really restart from nothing. Those are the cards that are really going to hurt us. Going into Planeswalkers, we have Comet. Before I go further, I want to talk about Unfinity for a second. Guys, I really don't like Unfinity, and I try not to use the cards. All of the Unfinity cards in this deck list are legal. No attractions, don't worry about that. But they just have so much good dice rolling, it's so hard to not have them. So Comet is kind of crazy, but we really use Comet just because he can roll a 6-sided die, pretty much for free every turn, and then we get upside from it. So we roll a die, depending on what we get, we either get 2 loyalty and make 2 green scroll creature tokens with haste. We get a 3, we -1 him, return a card with CMC 2 or less from our grave to our hand, a little bit of recursion. We get a 4 or 5 to just have him deal damage equal to a creature or player, and then we -2 loyalty from him. Or we can get 6 to give a +1, and then you may activate his ability 2 more times this turn. Change my mind, Comet is a 1-card infinite, you just gotta keep getting 6s. Going on. Academy Manufacturer. Mr. House makes treasures. So now since we're making treasures, we're making clues and foods to go along with it. That's extra life gain, that's extra card draw. We're running the whole ancient whatever dragon cycle. Ancient brass, when it deals combat damage to a player, roll a d20. When you do, you basically just reanimate target creatures with a total mana value X or less from your graveyard onto the battlefield under your control, where X is a result. So you can get a lot of your guys back, which is cool. And it's also not even your graveyard, it's just from graveyards, so you can split the difference if your opponent has some good stuff too. Ancient Copper Dragon, easily the best one. When he deals combat damage, roll a d20, you get that many treasure. Ancient Gold Dragon, when it deals combat damage to a player, roll a d20, you make that many guys with flying, pretty good. Brazen Dwarf, whenever you roll one or more die, deals 1 damage to each opponent. So we roll a lot of die, that's pretty much the whole goal, and even Mr. House on a whim, just by tapping 4 treasure, if we want, we can roll 4 die right off that. Brazen Dwarf is just going to deal 4 damage, just like that. And we have a lot of like effects like, you know, the dragons, and then we have a lot of cards like Chaos Channeler that just say when it attacks, do a thing, which is going to be more die for Brazen Dwarf to trigger off of. But Chaos Channeler, it attacks, you roll a d20. And again, all of these rolls that we're seeing, like all the dragons with the d20s, like we're profiting off them from Mr. House. Like all of these rolls come most likely, most definitely I would say, with a 3/3 body, and most likely with a treasure, just because the likelihood of us rolling 6 or below is, or I guess, yeah, 6 or below is not very good. It's literally like we have a 14 out of 20 chance to get what we want. The Chaos Channeler, he's just card advantage. We're just going to exile the top card of our library, and we can play it this turn. We can either do it 2 times, or we can do it 3 times. It really depends how lucky we get. Chaos Dragon is great. He has to attack each combat if able, which is really fine. He's a flying 4/4 with haste, kind of annoying to deal with. But it's good because he makes each player roll a d20, including us. So again, that's another free d20 roll, and then we just can't attack someone. Worst case scenario, we get unlucky and we just kind of have to kill him into an opponent. But again, we're still rolling d20s most likely, and he's a 4/4 with haste you get down on turn 3. Cyberman Patrol gives our creatures, artifact creatures, I guess, afflict 3. Mr. House makes robots, and I think it's fair to say that robots are artifact creatures. So having afflict 3 is great. Even if they get blocked, it's fine. Because they're 3/3s anyway, so it's either they take the damage, which is fine because they're taking 3 pretty much if they block or don't block. That's the whole good thing about Cyberman Patrol. Cyberman Squadron, on the other hand, gives our non-legendary artifact creatures Myriad. We have a lot of tokens that is gonna go absolutely nuts. So assuming we are in a pot of 4 and we have 3 opponents, each of those 3/3 guys that we have just from our commander now bring in 3 other 3/3s, each attacking a different player, which is really, really nice. It's a huge damage up. It's 7 mana, which is steep, but we make so much mana off Mr. House, it doesn't really matter that much. Delina, when she attacks, choose a target creature you control and then roll a d20. Again, roll a d20 when we attack, great. You're either gonna make a tapped an attacking token of it, and then we exile it at the end of combat, or we make one of those tokens, it doesn't go away. Wait, no, it does go away. It will go away, right? Someone correct me in the comments. I'm pretty sure that will still go away if we get a 15 to 20, and then we roll again, so that's ultimately 2 d20s we could get. Either way, it's a free d20. Disciple of the Vault, whenever an artifact is put into your graveyard from the battlefield, you may have target opponent lose 1 life. The cool thing about this is all of our treasures are artifacts, and when we tap them for mana, tap them and sacrifice them, they go to the grave. So every time we use a treasure, someone loses a life. Dockside Extortionist, he's just an easy way to get a lot of treasure. He's Dockside Extortionist, guys. Like, what really more is there to say? He most likely, at the worst case, is a permanent ritual that is a body. And like his flavor text, it's just business. Goldspan Dragon, we're a treasure deck. Kind of at the end of the day, we're like an artifact creature treasure deck, dice rolling deck. It all melds really good together. But whenever it attacks or becomes the target of a spell, make a treasure, and our treasures tap for 2, which is awesome. Grim Hireling, whenever 1 or more creatures you control deal combat damage to a player, make 2 treasures, which is really good. But the bottom effect is really cool. Pay a black, sacrifice X treasures to give a creature -X/-X. We can do it only as a sorcery, but we amass so many treasures, it hardly matters, right? Hellkite Tyrant is, I just think, a funny card. It's a 6-mana flying trample 6/6. When it deals combat damage to a player, gain control of all artifacts that player controls. Hopefully, we're going against an artifact deck. But even if we're not, at the beginning of our upkeep, if we have 20 or more artifacts, we win the game. Again, like, every time we roll a die, we are most likely getting a treasure and a 3/3 artifact creature. And we are rolling dice constantly. We have so much treasure generation in this deck. It is unreal. So Hellkite Tyrant is, like, legit a pretty reasonable way to win. Herald of Hadar, I think it's alright. I kind of like it because it's a mana sink that we can kind of roll d20s into and really just get guys at instant speed. I look at it as a combat trick. So it's a 5-mana 4/4, and it's alright. Paying 6 mana is steep, but we roll a d20, and then we get some kind of benefit from it. Either each opponent losing 2 life, draining each opponent for 2 life and we gain 2 life, or each opponent loses 2 life and you gain 2 life and you make 2 treasures. So it's kind of like a reduced rate. I think it's fine. It's paying to roll d20s. It's kind of steep, but we get treasure out of rolling the d20 anyway, so it doesn't really cost 6. And then we have other things like, you know, Goldspan Dragon that make our treasures tap for even more, so it's not that bad. Hoarding Ogre, just a lot of random commons from Baldur's Gate in this, but Hoarding Ogre is great. When he attacks, roll a d20, so we're getting a treasure and a guy off that pretty much right away. We're either going to make a treasure, we're going to make 2 treasures, or we're going to make 3 treasures. We're kind of okay with really whatever we get, because when he attacks, we make a treasure and a guy off house, and at least 1 treasure from him. So that's at least 2 mana and a guy. Ingenious Artillerist? I'll say that. Whenever 1 or more artifacts enters the battlefield under your control, it deals that much damage to each opponent. So he's great, you know? I forget the other name, the guy from before, but he's basically him. You know, whenever an artifact enters, deals that much to each opponent. Whenever we roll a d20, right, we're gonna make we're gonna make a treasure and a guy. So whenever we roll a d20, each opponent takes 2. At face value, that's pretty good. And then we have cards like Hoarding Ogre that make it even nuts. Like, if we attack with Hoarding Ogre, that's already, like, he's bolting everyone just for attacking. Iron Mastiff. When it attacks, roll a d20 for each player being attacked and ignore all but the highest roll. So we're a big token deck, so we can pretty much swing at with everyone every turn. Even if we don't, it doesn't really matter, just because we're rolling like a bunch of dice anyway and we're getting the best result, which is great. So assuming we get a 1 to 9, it's pretty unlikely that we do, just because we're attacking with other guys and we get to pick the highest result. But he deals damage equal to its power to defending player or to each opponent, which is pretty good because he is a 4/4 guy that rolls. Jan Jansen, I think he's good. So the way I look at him, right? Sacrifice an artifact creature, make 2 treasures. We sacrifice our one of our robots, we can make 2 mana, which is great, and he doesn't cost anything to tap. So we could pretty much ramp 2 treasure every turn, because we're rolling for free every turn. Or we can tap him and sacrifice a non-creature artifact, i.e. one of our treasures, to make 2 guys. So we basically just 1 for 2 something. Or I guess 2 for 1? 1 for 2? I don't know. We're always going to profit off of them, whatever we need. Lightfoot Rogue, I like it because it costs so low, right? It's just like 2 mana for a guy that rolls d20 when he attacks. And at the worst case scenario, like, who really wants to block a 2/1 Death Toucher? You know, like, I guess if someone has a token, just don't attack them if they have a token that will kill it. But the fact that he can also give himself Death Touch in First Strike can kind of get pretty crazy. No one's going to want to block it, or he'll just pump himself to be a 3/1. Either way, he rolls dice, and he's most likely just going to kill a creature. Marionette Master is a pretty easy way for us to win. It has Fabricate 3. When it enters the battlefield, put 3 1/1 counters on it, or make 3 1/1 guys. I like the idea of putting the counters on him instead, so he'll be a 6 mana 4/6, right? Yeah. But whenever an artifact you control is put into the graveyard from the battlefield, target opponent loses life equal to Marionette Master's power. That basically says whenever we sacrifice a treasure for mana, an opponent loses 4 life. We make a lot of treasure, and that's kind of nuts. Mayhem Devil is also kind of the same logic. Whenever a player sacrifices a permanent, it deals 1 damage to any target. So we're sacrificing our treasure. We can start picking off small creatures. We can deal direct damage. We can shoot planeswalkers. But more importantly than that, well, I guess not more importantly, something to note, I guess, it's whenever a player sacrifices a permanent. You got an opponent that sacrifices a fetch land, or they got like an Ashnod's Altar or whatever, we get to deal 1 damage to whatever, which is cool too. Mirkwood Bats is literally insane. There was low-key talks about this card getting banned in Commander when it got printed. I don't think it should. I think it's fine. 4 mana flying 2/3. Who cares? Whenever you create or sacrifice a token, each opponent loses 1 life. So when we make these treasures and these robots, so like if we have a good roll, or let's say we roll a 10, right? Who cares? That's average. We roll a 10, right? We're making 2 guys off. We're making a treasure and we're making a guy. Each opponent loses 2 life, right? And then we use that treasure to do something else. Each opponent loses 3 life, practically per roll. Every time we roll, each opponent loses 3. I think that's so cool. Mondrak and Ojer Tak are basically the same thing, the same logic. It doubles up and it triples up our tokens, right? Ojer, I didn't put the other side of it, but it's basically it transforms as a land and then you can flip it when you got a bunch of guys to be the creature again, so it's hard to get rid of. Mondrak, we can just make it indestructible pretty easily just because we can sacrifice one of the robots or just the treasures we make. But either way, it doubles up our guys. Pitiless Plunder, whenever another creature you control dies, make a treasure. So even if we do a big attack with our robots, Pitiless Plunder at least replaces them with treasure, which then can be tripled up or whatever to Mondrak or Ojer, which can then deal extra damage with like the Reckless Fireweaver, the Marionette Master effects. It all goes so well, guys. And stopping here, I haven't been this excited about a deck in a pretty good while. This deck is so cool. Professional Facebreaker, whenever 1 or more creatures you control deal combat damage to a player, you make a treasure, but it's an alternate way to use our treasure. We can sacrifice a treasure to exile the top card of our library, and we can play that card this turn. If we need like a quick draw, or let's say we don't have great draws, we can just sacrifice our treasure to exile the top card of our library and play it. If it's a land, cool, or we can just kind of whip something out like we need. It just continues our engine, lets us go further and further. Reckless Fireweaver, whenever another artifact enters the battlefield, deals 1 damage to each opponent. Short, sweet, to the point. We make a ton of artifacts. Our opponents are going to take a ton of damage. Will, Blade of the Frontiers, is an absolute huge deal in this deck. If you would roll a 1 or more dice, instead roll that many dice plus 1 and ignore the lower roll. Whenever you roll 1 or more dice, put a 1/1 counter on it. Cool, don't worry about the background, it doesn't matter. He just lets us roll 2 dice. We ignore the smaller one, but it pretty much almost guarantees that we're getting like the treasure and the robot from house. But also on all of our other cards, like treat like the ogre and like all of the cards that care about like what we roll for d20s, we always get the best option we could from them. Like maybe not the 20s, but like we're at least not getting the bad options. And finally, Zorn. He'd make a treasure, make that many, plus 1 additional treasure. He's a funny elemental. It just doubles up our treasure, and we are kind of a treasure deck. Treasure, dice rolling, robot, artifact creature, whatever. Going into sorceries, we have Dance Macabre, 5 mana. Each player sacrifices a non-token creature. Then you roll a d20 and add the toughness of the creature's sacrifice this way. So here's the cool thing, right? We roll a 1 to 14, return a creature card put into a graveyard display to the battlefield under your control. So the worst case scenario with this card is we just get back our creature and each opponent loses a creature, like a non-token, which is a big deal. And it's also nice because we get to add that to the roll anyway. So most likely we're gonna get the plus 15. So we roll, it's 5 mana to basically get whatever our opponent sacked and whatever our guy was back to the field. And we roll a d20 out of it, which is cool. Farewell, I know I put it as one of our vulnerabilities, but Farewell is simply too good to not have. Even the best decks need a backup plan, and I look at Farewell as a backup plan. You know, like even like I would rather restart from nothing than lose the game. You know, and farewell just kind of helps that happen. If like someone's got too many things, we can deal with it, right? It's like an insurance plan. And even if not, if we're going against a reanimator deck or an enchantress deck, we can just get rid of them. You know, it's no big deal. Then Merkule's Edict. Roll a d20 for 2 mana. It's like, that's how I look at this stuff, right? It's at the very worst, it's 2 mana for a 3/3 guy and a treasure. It's great. And then choose an opponent. That player sacrifices a creature, or each opponent sacrifices a creature, or each opponent sacrifices a creature with the greatest power among creatures that player controls. So worst case scenario, it's an edict that gets us a guy and a treasure, effectively costing 1 mana. Best case scenario is each of our opponents lose the biggest guy, and we still get the treasure and the guy, the 3/3. Organic Extinction, was that 10 mana? That's impossible to cast, but it has Improvise. Improvise basically, it costs. We can tap our artifacts to make it cost 1 less. So we can tap our treasure while not sacrificing them, which is cool to pay this cost. And then we could destroy all non-artifact creatures. We have a good amount of non-artifact creatures, but again, this is like one of the more insurance policy cards where it's like if our opponents don't have non-artifact creatures and we have a ton of 3/3s, we can just swing in and kill someone. If things are looking grim, it at least leaves our like tokens off to the side, which is nice. And then Ruinous Ultimatum is destroy all non-land permanents your opponents control. This card is hard to cast, but in our deck, it's actually pretty easy to cast because our treasure can tap for anything. So we don't even need to really worry about the color pips. It ultimately just costs 7 treasures. Instance. We have Mr. House. Mr. House needs to be on the field for this deck to really flourish, right? So assume we do both. This is a kill spell. That's how you read it, is this is a kill spell. Creatures you control gain flying, vigilance, double strike, lifelink, indestructible, and protection from all colors. They can't be blocked, they deal double damage, you gain a ton of life, right? And they can then block your opponents if need be because they have vigilance. This is gonna kill someone. It's like double, like it's double damage, right? It's like unreal. Each of our tokens is swinging in for 6 at least, and it's all unblockable. Anguished Unmaking is just great removal. We just get rid of something we don't like. We lose 3 life, it sucks, but I mean, like, it's exile, really whatever, for 3 mana, and it's great. Chaos Warp, you just get rid of something. Hopefully whatever they rip into is worse than what you got rid of. Contraband Livestock. I like the art, I think it's kind of cool. But it's 2 mana, exile target creature, and then roll a d20. Its controller makes a 4/4 green ox creature token. Its controller makes a 2/2 green boar creature token. Its controller creates a 0/1 white goat creature token. So I know this isn't the best removal, but you also have to think it's like it comes with a treasure, so it basically costs 1 mana, right? It comes with a treasure and it comes with a 3/3, right? Assuming we get a 10 to 20, our 3/3 that we get with it is already bigger than the other thing. And worst case, they get the Ox, and it's like, it's just a 4/4. Like, we could just block it with 2 3/3s, and it's essentially the same result anyway. Deadly Dispute as an additional cost to sacrifice an artifact or a creature. We can get rid of a treasure or one of our robots to draw 2 cards and make a treasure. So even if we just get it, it doesn't matter. It's good card draw, it's good ramp if we need it. Deflecting Swat, we have our commander at all times, so if someone tries to do something we don't like, we change the targets. Flawless Maneuver, if someone tries to wrath our board, we always have our commander. Our guys are indestructible. Loren's Escape is a weird one, but I like it a lot. So, target artifact or creature gains hexproof and indestructible until end of turn, scry 1. This is basically for targeted removal. You know, it's kind of nice to always just leave it up to protect house. And we can always scry 1 after. This is just if someone has like a kill spell, swords, or like whatever, right? House gets to live, and we still scry 1. Source to Plowshares, it's Source to Plowshare. It's just a great card. It's like easy removal, gain a lot of life, it's fine. And then we have Will's Reversal. Choose target spell or ability with 1 or more targets. Roll a d20 and add the greatest power among creatures you control. We can choose new targets for that spell or ability, or we can then copy it and do it. It's pretty much like a double up. You know, it's kind of like if someone has trying to think of like an example. It's kind of like protection. Like if someone tries to like target remove like one of our creatures or something that we don't like, we can just kind of change it, right? or we can kind of double up and change it. Either way, we roll a d20, which is always good. Going into artifacts, Arcane Signet is great. It's just Arcane Signet. Clown card, I don't really like Infinity, but it's X, right? And it says when it enters the battlefield, roll X 6-sided die. So I know it's not as guaranteed as it's not as guaranteed as I guess a d20, but it's kind of still nice just because it's pay X, roll X dice, and then if we have things like will or whatever, it can get even better. But it enters battlefield, roll X 6-sided dice. For each odd result, create a 1/1 white robot creature token. For each even result, put a 1/1 counter on it. So we either, I mean, it's still like even if we miss every die roll, we still either make a huge like vehicle, or we just make a ton of little like blockers, which is still fine, and they're artifacts too, which is fine. Component pouch, 3 mana. Remove a component counter from component pouch to add 2 mana of different colors. So then it's nice because we can tap it and roll a d20, right? Put a component counter on component couch, or we can put 2 component counters on component couch. So it's kind of a mana rock that we either store up if we don't need it, or it's just 2 mana of any colors, or different colors, which is still pretty good too. But it's still just an instant speed, roll a d20, which is nice. So if we need it on our turn for the mana, that's fine. If we don't use it, we just, put counters on it. It's no big deal. I like it. I think it's good. KCI, Card Clan Ironworks, sacrifice an artifact, add 2 mana to your mana pool. We can sacrifice treasures, we can sacrifice the robots that we make to do even bigger stuff. I think it's pretty good. I think it's like an easy way to get mana. We can even sacrifice itself for 2 mana if we really, really need to. But I think it's hard to have an artifact deck without KCI. It just offers too much mana. We have Lightning Greaves, really to exclusively put on Mr. House to keep him alive. Soul Ring is Soul Ring, it's easy, fast mana. Swiftfoot Boots, gonna keep Mr. House alive, give him hexproof so he can't be targeted. Then we have the deck of many things. We have a 2 cost into it, tap it, roll a d20, and then subtract the number of cards in your hand. If the result is 0 or less, discard your hand. It's most likely, it might, but either way we roll a d20, which is still really good, right? Return a card at random from your grave to your hand, already great. Draw 2 cards, fantastic. And then if we get 20, it's very unlikely because we can only get this if we have no cards in our hand, and we really don't want that anyway. Put a creature card from any graveyard onto the battlefield under your control. When that creature dies, its owner loses the game. It's just a funny way to win, I guess. We're not really going to be worried about that. It's just nice because we can pay 2 mana to roll a d20. It's really going to cost 1 mana because we're most likely going to get a treasure back anyway. Then it's a reanimation from our grave to the hand, or it's card draw. It's really good. And it sometimes makes someone lose the game in a funny way. Treasure chest, I think is cool. I think it's cool. So pay 4 mana, sacrifice it, roll a d20. I hope we don't get a 1, right? That's the worst case scenario. But we can either pay 4 mana to get 5 treasures, and again, 5 treasures entering the battlefield. We have a lot of doublers. We have like a lot of artifact doublers. We have a lot of the guys like Ruthless Fireweaver and artifact enters. People take damage. We draw 3 cards and gain 3 life, which is really good. Or we search our deck for an artifact card, put it onto the battlefield. Otherwise, put that card into your hand. So we don't really care about that much about getting the 20 on treasure chest. It's really about making the 5 treasures because that's ultimately ramp, and drawing 3 cards and gaining 3 life, and rolling the d20 itself. I guess if we had to get it, we would get maybe the deck of many things, or we would maybe get KCI, but maybe just, I don't know, there's a lot of options we could get. And then the final artifacts are Unwinding Clock. Untap all artifacts you control during each other player's untap step. That's great because a lot of our artifacts tap to roll d20s, like Vexing Puzzle Box and all the other ones, not all of them, a lot of the other ones you've seen so far. And it even untaps all of our creatures, which is really good. Vexing Puzzle Box is really cool because whenever you roll 1 or more dice, put a number of charge counters on Vexing Puzzle Box equal to the result. Even if we don't do that, right? Add 1 mana of any color, it's a mana rock that also rolls us a d20, right? And then we can remove 100 charge counters from it, search our library for an artifact card, put that card onto the battlefield under your control. It's kind of the same logic with, as, I forget the card name right away, Treasure Chest. We don't really, there's not really a ton of great, like, crazy options to get. They're all good options. I don't think you can really go wrong with any of them. But it's really just there to roll the d20 and just for mana. And then the final artifact, Wand of Wonder. 4 mana, pay 4 mana, tap it, roll a d20. Each opponent exiles cards from the top of their library until they exile an instant or sorcery card. Then, shuffle the rest into their library. You may cast up to X instant or sorcery spells from among the cards exiled this way without paying their mana cost. Depending on the result, it's either X is 1, 2, or 3. Super, super cool, right? 4 mana, you roll a d20, really 3 mana because you get the treasure back and a guy, right? Then each opponent shows cards until they get the first instant or sorcery, and then whichever the best one is, you just get to cast for free. Or, ideally, you can do all of them if you roll a 20, or you can do 2 of them, or whatever, right? The thing is you basically get free cards that you get to pick the best one of, you know, with Wand of Wonder. So it could be a ramp spell, it could be really like a kill spell, it could be whatever. Either way, it's instant speed, it's free, rolls a d20, it makes a guy. Going into enchantments, we have Anointed Procession. This is another token doubler. We have a lot of tokens. Barbarian class is another huge deal, just like Will. If you would roll 1 or more dice, instead roll that many dice plus 1 and ignore the lowest roll. Already really good. Almost guarantees we're never going to get the bottom options. And then whenever you roll 1 or more dice, target creature you control gains +2/+0 and gains menace until end of turn. We can just put that on some of our guys. You know, now our guys are 5/3s with menace. That, like, who cares? You know, that's already really good. They're just tokens we're getting passively just from rolling dice anyways. And then creatures you control have haste, which is just a big upside, but it's really just for that top part that lets us roll that many +1. Revel in Riches is just another funny you win the game card. Whenever a creature an opponent controlled dies, create a treasure, and then at the beginning of our upkeep, if you have 10 or more treasures, you win the game. That's super, super doable. It's just very doable. And then the final 2 enchantments are Smothering Tithe, which taxes our opponents and gets us treasure whenever they draw cards. And then we have Tempered Steel. I just couldn't help myself. Tempered Steel, artifact creatures you control get +2/+2. Now whenever we roll a d20, or really a die, we're just going to get a 5/5, which I think is really cool. Going into the lands, we just have all of the shock lands, we have all of the check lands, we have all of the, they're not fast lands, I don't know, the 2 lands or whatever they're called, you know that cycle, the vow lands. We have all of the battle bond lands because we are assuming we are in a pot of 4 and that they will always enter untapped. And then going into the actual like lands that I guess need more description, Cavernous Souls, we're going to say human. House is a human, we have a couple other humans in the deck. But since we need them so much, we just can't have them be countered. You know, that's pretty much it. Command Tower, it's Command Tower, taps for any color. Exotic Orchard, I always like to add in my decks just because it's almost always an untapped tool. You know, very rarely does it miss on a color. And at the very worst, you know, it just gives you 1 mana of a color you don't need, and that's still not that bad. And then finally, we just have Savai Triumph. It's just a Triumph for Mardu. It's good. Going into lands, we have 7 mountains, we have 6 plains, we have 6 swamps. That totals up our entire deck list to be about 35 lands, I believe, which I think is fine. We could even go maybe less lands just because we have so much treasure production. But I still think 35 is a good sweet spot because we don't have like a ton of ramp if we don't get Mr. House going. Finally, guys, thanks for watching. Like, comment, subscribe to the channel, and then if you need any of the cards in the deck, go to the link down below. Check it out on TCG Player. It helps me out, helps the channel out. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you next time.